All right, so right now we have the capability of logging in, creating brand new users, and logging in as existing users. Let's see, Bob and Bob. Bob currently, there we go. We logged that in as Bob, and let's move on to being able to list objects that are related to Bob. Right? So Bob has right now a relationship with websites, right? And currently, if we go to websites, right now it's probably website is using the hard-coded values from the website service that is right now implemented on the client side. Okay, so let's fix that. Let's move that over to the server. So right now the that is probably implemented in here under websites, right? So we have here website. We have the template. Here's the website list. There it is. Probably we won't have to do much here. We are iterating over all the websites, and looks like indeed we have one website for Bob. Okay. All right. And what else? We'll need to know what its controller is getting it from. So here's a controller. The controller is using the find website for user, right, in the service. That's probably going to have to refactor that because probably it's just using the local array. So let's look at in the service for the website. There it is, right? It's using this hard-coded list of arrays of websites. Make sense? Right. Okay. So let's start fixing this. All right. So the HTML, we're not going to have to do anything here. That can stay the same. There's nothing to do here. The control we're going to have to change a little bit, right? This is going to return promises and whatnot, all that jazz. Yes. The find website for users in the service, it's going to be re-implemented so that instead of doing this, it's going to have to go out to the server to do this. Yes. All right. So let's do that. For this, we're going to need a $HTTP that it's going to go out to the server. Right, so it's going to need a URL. The URL is going to be what? It's going to be /API, okay, then followed by /user, and then I want the websites for a particular user, right? So we need to know for what user. There it is. And then what is that I want for that user? I want website. Which website? Well, no, I want all of them, right? This says find websites for user. See that? So I don't need to specify which website. I want all of them. Right? So following the RESTful syntax for these URLs, that's the correct URL. And then now that I have HTTP, I'm going to, since I'm doing a read, on a read operation, I'm going to do a get for that URL, and that's it. Right? It's going to go out to the server to fetch these URLs. Make sense? And this content, all this, we're going to move over to the server side. All right, so if we refresh this and we go to the network, and we clear this and refresh, notice that we get an error message saying, I went to the server to retrieve all the websites for user 234, but there was no such URL on the server. Makes sense. We never generated it. We never created it. So let's go to the server to do that now. Yes? Let's go on to the server. So on the server side, what we're going to do is we're going to create a just like we had a user service, we're going to create a website service. Yes. So let's do that. Let's create a new JavaScript. So this will be a website.service.server. Yes. And in here we're going to be listening for an incoming GET request. Yes. Right. So to do that, we'll need an instance of Express. So we're going to require our Express, there it is, and we're going to be listening for an incoming GET request for the following URL pattern. It starts with API, followed by user, followed by a user ID, followed by website. Right? That's the pattern for the URL. And the function, I'm going to call it the same way we called it on the client, just so that I can keep it straight in my head. Right, there it is. That's a function. I'm going to implement it right here. it's participating in a request-response cycle, right? This is the server side of a request-response cycle. So there's our request and our response. I'm going to have to parse out the user ID from the request. It's part of a path parameter. It's not a query parameter. It's a path parameter, so it's in the params, right? And it's called user ID. Now I have the user ID. I need to retrieve all the websites for that user ID. I'm going to copy over that hard-coded list of websites. I'm going to move it over to the server and put it here. There it is. And the logic for retrieving those, to find those websites, I'm going to copy them from here. I'm going to move them over to the server side. Right? Next week, we're going to have to refactor this so that it uses the database. Right now, it's just using hard-coded arrays. What's it doing? It's iterating over all the arrays. It's pushing all those arrays. And at the end, it's going to send back response, send the sites. Okay? Now, if you know that the send function, it's a very powerful function. It knows how to send a whole bunch of things. Right? It can send back files. It can send back, whatever. Right? A stream. Here, it's returning a JSON object. So the send function is very powerful. It's very smart. It knows what to do, what correct bind type to use when sending back the data. It sees that this is JSON, and it uses the correct bind type application/JSON. Yes, but the send function is a little bit of an overkill. It's too smart. It's too heavy. If you know this is JSON, if you know that what you're sending back is specifically JSON, there's no need to use the send function. You can instead use the specialized send function called just .json. This only knows how to send JSON. Okay, it's faster. It doesn't need to do a lot of testing and checking and any of that. Okay, all right. Notice that if it didn't find any sites, if there are no sites, it'll just return an empty array. All right, or the sites that it found. Okay, so let's restart the server. I'll restart the server. If I refresh, it didn't work. Wait, what? Website still 4.4. Why are you still 4.4? I wrote it. We never loaded this from our application. In our application, in our app, we loaded the user service, but we never loaded the website service. So let's do that. Require our website service server. Okay, right. Also notice a thing here that here we are not putting any of the code inside of an if statement. Right? We did that on the client side in Angular, right? But here it's still JavaScript, yes? But it's JavaScript running on the server, not on the client. On the client, this JavaScript had to compete with other libraries, yes? That were not our own. Were libraries written by other folks, all competing on the same namespace, correct? We don't have that problem here on the server, right? We have full control over our namespace, right? Nobody's trampling on any other namespace, so we don't need none of this, right? We don't need the iffy statements, on the server side. All right, so let's restart the server. Let's try it again, and it still comes back with empty. Website. Oh, it is coming back with something. Why is it not showing? Oh, because probably the service came back with data, but the controller is still. There's a promise. Right? We had to handle all those asynchronous part, right? The controller is still written as to use synchronous calls, right? We need to rewrite it so that it uses this asynchronous mechanism. So let's go back on the client side. It was able to get it. Yes, we returned it correctly. The problem is that the controller is still expecting this to be a synchronous call as opposed to an asynchronous call. So instead, what we're going to do is that we're going to move this out of the way, and instead we're going to do the then, and here's the response coming back from the server. Yes, and then model.websites is in the data here, right? Data. Okay, so let's refresh this. There it is, right? We got the data from the server. Everybody okay? Right. Let's clean this up a little bit. This dot, we can also add an enter here so that They're all nicely lined up. It's a little bit easier to read, right? They're just functions that are chained one after another. Right? Very, very common in JavaScript in general, right, to write in this fashion. Another thing is that, notice that the controller is doing a response.data. Okay? It should not really be the responsibility of the controller knowing that this is coming from a server, that this is some kind of response, and that there's some metadata associated to this. That's all HTTP stuff, right? The controller should not be responsible for handling any of that. That still should live on the service, right? So we could rewrite this a little bit different, and do this kind of like unwrapping the data from the HTTP response, right? That should be done on the service side, not on the controller. So let's move that over to the server. Let's go back to the service here, and what we could do here is that we could handle this response, this then. We could handle it here on the service, do the unwrapping here on the servers, and then just return just the data back to the controller. Make sense? So let's do that. So here we can do a then. So handle the unwrapping here. So we get here the response. So this is, we're moving what we were doing in the controller. We're moving it up to the service. Yes? Right. So basically, what we're doing is that we're copying this. We're copying this over to the controller so that we're handling it here on the service side. We unwrap it, right? And that's what we return. The unwrapped data. Okay, so that here on the controller, we can just say, and this is, these are websites, all unwrapped, right? So now the controller is unaware that this ever had to do anything with HTTP, that there was some metadata associated, was wrapped in some HTTP response, okay? So it's cleaner, right? The controller doesn't know any of that. It's not its responsibility to know these things, right? Every concern should live in its own bucket, okay? Bucket of concern. So if we refresh, right, this still works the same way. Yes? Everybody okay? All right. All right, so let's keep working here. The next thing would be that if we're going to create a brand new website, right now it just navigates to new website, and we would like to be able to create a new website, right? So let's do that next.